Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide, a reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that M&M candies were first sold to the U.S. Armed Forces in World War II because they were easy to carry and didn't melt in high temperatures? Learn how the two letters in M&Ms stand for the last names of Forrest Mars and Bruce Murrie, and that the exact recipe for M&Ms is a closely guarded secret. Discover that the Mars family is one of the wealthiest families in the world, and that M&M's flavors include almond, peanut butter, crispy, dark chocolate, pretzel, mint, and more.
You know, when we talk about military-grade engineering, I think there's this expectation of heavy machinery. Like, you picture tanks rolling across the desert or, Kevlar vests, perfectly machined steel.
Right, yeah. We think of things built to withstand the absolute extremes of human experience.
Exactly. Indestructible, unyielding.
And strictly utilitarian, right? Like form follows function, completely devoid of joy.
Right, but then you look at a modern battlefield, or even look inside a space shuttle, and right there next to the titanium and the high-tech gear is, well, it's a tiny, brightly colored circle of chocolate.
Yeah, it's basically the ultimate piece of covert tactical engineering, just hiding in plain sight as a snack.
It really is. So today, for our deep dive, we are unpacking the $143 billion empire hiding inside that candy shell. We're looking at how a simple, candy-coated chocolate evolved from a wartime military ration into a global behemoth that has literally gone to space.
Yeah, it's wild.
And we're going to pull out the business and historical insights for you along the way. Okay, let's unpack this, because the history behind a snack you and I completely take for granted is genuinely staggering.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the M&M isn't just a candy. It's really a masterclass in supply chain problem solving and strategic partnerships.
So before M&Ms were a global phenomenon sitting at every single grocery store checkout aisle, they were born out of a very specific observation of military ingenuity overseas. Let's set the stage with a man named Forrest Mars.
Right. Born on March 21st, 1904.
Yeah. And he was just 7 years old when his father, Frank C. Mars, founded Mars Incorporated, which was this small candy business in Newark, New Jersey back in 1911.
So Forrest was essentially born into American candy royalty. He was groomed from a very young age to eventually take over the family business. But instead of just handing him the keys to the factory, his father actually sent him overseas to get real-world experience.
Which makes sense, right?
Yeah, he needed to understand the global market before he could run an empire.
So, while he's in Great Britain, Forrest notices something peculiar. He sees soldiers eating these small, pill-sized candies called Smarties.
And not the chalky American ones?
No, not those. The British ones made by H.I. Rowntree and Company. They had a milk chocolate center, but they were covered in a hard candy shell.
What's fascinating here is the immediate recognition of utility. Forrest didn't just see a tasty treat, he saw a brilliant solution to a massive logistical problem.
The melting.
Exactly, chocolate melts. It's a fundamental property of cocoa butter. Its melting point is right around human body temperature, between 93 and 98 degrees Fahrenheit.
So as soon as you touch it.
Yeah, it makes it luxurious to eat, but an absolute nightmare to transport or store or carry in a pocket.
Right, it just turns into a messy puddle.
Mm-hmm.
But the Rowntree candy solved this by encasing the chocolate.
Exactly, and the mechanism behind this is a process called panning. Yeah, panning isn't just some buzzword, it's a very specific, highly calibrated tumbling process. Imagine a massive cement mixer, but instead of concrete, it's gently tossing liquid chocolate centers while a precise mixture of liquid sugar is sprayed in.
Oh, wow.
Right, so as the water from the syrup evaporates in the tumbling air, it leaves behind this microscopic, crystallized sugar armor. It basically creates an almost perfectly sealed, unmeltable outer layer that protects the sensitive chocolate inside.
That's incredible. And Forrest realizes this is revolutionary. So he meets with the Rowntree executives and actually secures a patent for the production of this concept, aiming to create a new and improved version for the American market.
But he hits a wall.
A massive bottleneck, yeah. He has the patent, the IP, but he completely lacks the physical chocolate supply to manufacture it at scale.
The raw materials. It's the classic business paradox.
Wow.
You hold the blueprint for a revolutionary product, but you don't control the supply chain required to actually build it.
Yeah, because In the late 1930s, chocolate production in the U.S. was heavily dominated by just a few major players who fiercely controlled the import of cocoa beans.
Which forces Forrest into what I think is one of the most incredible alliances in snack history.
Oh, for sure. He teams up with Bruce Murrie. And Bruce is the son of William Murrie, who was the president of the Hershey Company.
The primary rival to the Mars family.
It's the ultimate corporate irony. It's like Apple having the blueprints for the very first iPhone, but having to secretly partner with Samsung royalty to get the microchips and glass screens.
That is a perfect analogy.
Mars had the intellectual property, but Murrie held the keys to the actual chocolate.
It is a stunning collaboration, and if we look at the mechanics of it, it highlights a crucial point about global travel shaping business innovation. This cross-pollination British candy engineering meeting American manufacturing muscle was the absolute catalyst.
Yeah, it wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Right. It required stepping outside the insular world of Newark, New Jersey, seeing a thermodynamic problem solved in a different international context, and having the sheer audacity to bring rival corporate dynasties together to execute it.
So they gear up to produce the first batches of their candy-coated milk chocolates, and the company was literally named Mars and Murrie.
Mars and Murrie.
Yeah, but Mars and Murrie was simply way too long to print on these tiny candies. So in 1940, M&Ms were born.
Two initial letters that mask a very complex, high-stakes corporate alliance.
Exactly. So Mars and Murrie, they have the product. They have the catchy, abbreviated name. But their initial market strategy wasn't targeting kids in movie theaters.
No, not at all.
Because of the candy's unique heat-resistant properties, their first audience was soldiers on the battlefield.
The ultimate stress test for any physical product.
Yeah. M&Ms were first created and sold in 1941 exclusively to the U.S. Armed Forces during World War II. And I mean exclusively.
Yeah, that word exclusively carries an immense amount of weight when we analyze their business trajectory.
How?
Well, we have to look at the logistics of World War II supply chains. The U.S. military was suddenly tasked with shipping millions of tons of food across oceans into the tropical humid theaters of the Pacific or, the sweltering summer campaigns of North Africa.
Very brutal environments.
Exactly. Soldiers needed intense caloric density to survive combat, but standard chocolate bars would instantly turn into useless, unappetizing liquid inside a rucksack.
But the M&M survived the journey.
Yeah.
That hard sugar panning we talked about meant the chocolate stayed perfectly intact no matter the environment. The military legacy is actually so deeply ingrained that M&Ms are still included in meals ready to eat, those MRE field rations for U.S. soldiers today.
Which makes sense.
And it's the literal origin of their famous tagline, right? Melts in your mouth, not in your hands.
It's a brilliant distillation of their core functional value proposition. It tells the consumer exactly what problem the product solves.
But hold on, let me ask you this. Was selling exclusively to the military actually a stroke of marketing genius? Or was their hand completely forced?
That's... Ooh.
Because sugar and chocolate were heavily rationed during World War II. It's entirely possible the government was the only buyer they were legally allowed to scale with.
Yeah.
So did they really plan this massive brand exclusivity? Or did they just get lucky with wartime rationing?
That is the exact right question to ask when untangling corporate mythology. The truth is really a synthesis of both.
Okay.
It was undeniably a wartime necessity. I mean, civilian rations were incredibly strict, and government contracts were the absolute lifeblood of any manufacturing facility during the early 1940s.
Right.
If you wanted access to industrial quantities of sugar, you basically had to be making something for the war effort. But the brilliant pragmatism of the move is what really stands out.
What do you mean by pragmatism here?
Well, by embedding the product into the daily harsh lives of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, Mars and Murrie essentially created a captive, intensely loyal audience. Think about the psychological association at play here.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Right. In the midst of combat, strict rationing, extreme physiological stress, this tiny, colorful candy provided a rare moment of comfort, a quick hit of glucose, and a literal taste of home. They weren't just supplying calories, they were building a profound emotional bond with the user.
Wow. They effectively feeded the civilian market by sending the product to war first.
Precisely. When the war eventually ended and those troops came home, Mars and Murrie had inadvertently cultivated a massive consumer base that returned craving the exact candy they relied on overseas.
That's wild.
They turned a logistical wartime necessity into the ultimate word-of-mouth marketing campaign.
So the war ends, the soldiers come home, and the candy has to adapt to civilian life. What started as a utilitarian military ration rapidly expands into a cultural icon.
Yeah, the post-war economic boom happens and they start innovating.
Right. By 1954, they introduced peanut M&Ms, which obviously becomes a massive hit.
They proved the original concept worked, so they started iterating on the internal architecture of the candy.
And they start hitting these massive cultural milestones. You jump ahead to 1984, and M&Ms become the official snack of the Olympic Games in Los Angeles.
Moving from the trenches to the global podium, it's a deliberate shift in brand positioning, associating the candy with peak human performance and international unity rather than just, well, survival.
And this is my favorite part, they literally leave the planet entirely. M&Ms made history when they went into space on the Space Shuttle Columbia.
Oh, yeah.
Which makes perfect sense when you think about it. Astronauts need food that's easy to eat, but more importantly, it cannot crumble.
Exactly. The crumbs are a hazard.
Right. A stray potato chip crumb floating in zero gravity could get lodged in delicate instrumentation, get sucked into an air filtration system, cause a massive disaster.
Yeah.
And, of course, the food can't melt.
Right.
It's the exact same logistical problem as the soldiers in zero gravity.
The extreme environment remains a constant requirement, even as the specific context changes from combat to orbital exploration. The engineering of the candy perfectly suits environments where traditional food just fails.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let's look at the sheer scale of modern production. Today, Mars Incorporated makes over 400 million M&Ms every single day.
That number is genuinely difficult for the human brain to conceptualize.
400 million is a really tough number to wrap your head around. But picture this for a second. If you lined up a single day's production edge to edge, that candy chain stretches roughly 3,500 miles.
Wow.
That is farther than driving from New York City to Los Angeles. A new cross-country highway of chocolate is created every 24 hours.
And yet, amidst that staggering, almost astronomical industrial output, the fundamental product remains remarkably consistent.
Well, mostly consistent. Because the Mars company explicitly guards the recipe for M&Ms as a closely held secret.
Yes, the secret recipe.
But come on, let's be real here. If you are producing 400 million of anything a day across massive global supply chains, requiring literal trainloads of sugar and cocoa, how can a recipe produced 400 million times daily possibly remain a true secret?
It's a fair point.
There have to be thousands of factory workers, logistics managers, and global suppliers involved. Is it a real secret, or is it just the myth-making of the brand?
It's an excellent point of skepticism, honestly. The secret is likely far less about a single magical ingredient locked in a vault and much more about the proprietary, highly calibrated manufacturing process. It's the exact temperatures of the facility, the specific RPMs of the panning machines creating that even shell, the precise ratios of the cocoa blend sourced from different continents.
So the secret is the execution, not the ingredients.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, maintaining that aura of a secret recipe is crucial for brand mystique.
Oh, for sure.
It's part of how a brand transitions from a purely functional product, and remember, its initial selling point was just that it doesn't melt in your pocket, to an emotional, cultural touchstone.
Right.
Whether it's the Olympics, space travel, or a closely guarded corporate secret, they've cemented their legacy by making the candy feel incredibly special, even when they're churning out enough of it to circle the globe.
They make the ubiquitous feel exclusive. And producing 400 million units a day of an effectively unmeltable product doesn't just change snack logistics, it fundamentally alters the financial DNA of the creators.
Oh, absolutely.
The descendants of that 7-year-old boy in Newark are now sitting on a $143 billion empire. The Mars family, who, by the way, also own a massive pet food division, is one of the wealthiest families on Earth.
It is a staggering accumulation of generational wealth, built largely on the back of a very simple, highly replicable consumer good.
But you don't maintain a $143 billion market cap by just making the exact same milk chocolate button for 80 years.
No, you have to adapt.
Exactly. To keep their dominance, they've created an endless aisle of flavors. They started with standard milk chocolate and peanuts, but now they've evolved into incorporating complex inclusions like pretzels and crispy rice, and capturing highly specific niche trends like mint dark chocolate, raspberry dark chocolate, hazelnut.
They're constantly experimenting.
They're continually introducing new variations just to test the waters. Which makes me want to ask you, the listener, which M&M's flavor is your favorite? I'm sure you have one that you immediately reach for when you're at the store.
I imagine the peanut butter and the pretzel varieties have fiercely loyal followings out there. They really tap into that deeply satisfying sweet and salty flavor profile.
Oh, definitely. But looking at this from a strict business logic perspective, why?
What do you mean?
Well, when you have a perfect $143 billion recipe that literally fueled the Allied forces and went to space, why mess with it? Doesn't throwing coconut and pretzel into the mix risk diluting the brand? Doesn't it water down the iconic core identity that got them to the top in the first place?
This raises an important question, and it's a tightrope that every single legacy brand eventually has to walk.
Right.
The simple answer is the modern consumer's demand for novelty is relentless. Yes, the core milk chocolate M&M is iconic, but the supermarket snack aisle is infinitely more crowded and competitive today than it was in 1941.
Oh, it's a war zone in the grocery store.
Exactly. Supermarket shelves are premium real estate. If you stand still, you lose that physical shelf space to the newest trend.
So it's defensive innovation.
Exactly. What Mars is doing with these flavor extensions is a calculated, brilliant risk to command shelf space and push competitors out.
That makes a lot of sense.
They are leveraging the trust and the architectural format of the M&M, that familiar, protective candy shell we discussed earlier, to deliver entirely new sensory experiences. A pretzel M&M captures the massive sweet and salty trend without requiring Mars to spend billions creating, marketing, and trademarking an entirely new brand from scratch.
Right. They protect their empire by expanding its borders from within.
It's highly efficient.
It's a Trojan horse made of chocolate. You use the protective armor of the candy shell to sneak new flavor concepts right onto the shelf.
The shell is the brand. The inside is simply the canvas for innovation.
Wow. So what does this all mean? We started by looking at a tiny piece of candy, and we've ended up tracing a genuinely epic historical arc.
Yeah, we really have.
Just to recap this incredible journey for you, we went from a 7-year-old boy's future inheritance to observing British soldiers on foreign battlefields. That sparked a cross-dynasty alliance between rival chocolate families, creating an exclusive WWII ration built purely for thermodynamic survival.
Quite the origin story.
And from those harsh battlefields, it soared onto the space shuttle, becoming an American cultural staple. And today, it results in a $400 million a day, $143 billion empire, all built on a brilliant, simple piece of engineering, a candy shell that simply refuses to melt.
It really is a masterclass in adaptation,
Oh, wow.
which leaves us with a fascinating thread to pull on. If the original success of the M&M was born from the need to survive extreme heat and harsh wartime conditions without melting, what might the M&M of the future look like?
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. As we face shifting global climate challenges, or as we look toward long-term deep space habitation, how will the next generation of food engineers have to reinvent the snacks we take for granted today? What extreme environment will dictate the next billion-dollar candy innovation?
Thank you for joining us for this day in his story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in his story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.